Hello. Checking in with the 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow, uh, a 2019 fantasy novel where the January of the title is January Skeller. When the book opens in 1901, a young girl who is taken on a journey by her, what at first seems like her ward, but then apparently is sort of a keeper, is her father's employer, Mr. Locke. Mr. Locke, Scottish, takes her on a trip to a place in Kentucky where she's wandering about, and she opens a book that she found in a trunk and writes into it a story about a door. And then suddenly there's a blue door there. She opens it and goes in and is in another world. But then she hears Mr. Locke's voice and she comes back. And she tries to tell Mr. Locke about this, and he tells her she's lying, and indeed the door is gone. And she's taken back to the thing. She kind of protests that she's not lying. She sneaks out and goes back and finds that everything is burned, including her little book that Mr. Locke had taken away from her and tossed on the ground. And she's taken back to their place, which, I can't remember where their place is. It's not obviously in Kentucky. It's somewhere in the United States. And where she's put under very strict tutelage of a nanny, and is basically kind of slowly ground down. She gets to see her father. She is a copper-skinned girl we'll go with copper-skinned girl, and her father is dark, and he's got multiple tattoos. He comes back. He is Mr. Locke's employee, and he goes all over the world tracking down artifacts, and indeed Mr. Locke's house is crammed full of artifacts, like a veritable Smithsonian. And we go through the years. She has a young boy who's kind of a peddler, who's her friend, not a peddler, but lowborn. And he brings her, at the beginning, he brings her like magazines like the Argosy, adventure magazines and stuff like that. She's all about adventure and kind of swashbuckling and thinking about going off with her father and stuff like that. But through the years, she's slowly kind of ground down. They get less and less of a relationship. But he, who is not fallen prey to the acne and other things of boyhood, but instead is leaner and even more handsome, brings her a puppy, a yellow-eyed puppy, and she calls it Sinbad, and it is a very good judge of character. Indeed, when she and her new governess, Jane, whose last name I can't remember, but is born in British East Africa, black woman. She is employed by her father, Julian Scholar, to raise her, even though she's like 17. A plantation guy looks at them and says, "Oh, hey," looking at the dark woman after talking about coolies. That's like, "Oh, when you get tired of these two, they could come down to my plantation and keep my bed warm." At which point Sinbad bites him. Good and solid. So yes, doesn't like racists. Gotta like that in a dog. And what happens? So yes, she has kind of an ally now in Jane. But she gets terrible news from Mr. Locke, who says that her father has been missing for like 3 months. His camp scattered and abandoned. He is presumed dead. Indeed, he says he's dead, but don't worry, you have me, which is like, oh, that's not good. And as he tells her this, she ruffles the pages of the book that she found in that very same thing, which she's been assuming that all this stuff has been put there by Mr. Locke, but I doubt that highly. And indeed, there's a book, and it's called The 10,000 Doors by a Innis Yule Innis scholar, which tells the story of Adelaide Lee Larson, a young girl born in 1866, growing up in Kentucky, who's out in the woods, out in by the kind of haunted kind of cabin that's on one of their abandoned hay fields, and meets a what she calls a black boy in a long thin robe, who talks about being from a different land and working with words and stuff like that. Indeed, the author says that she's a scholar who's been this is his apprentice thing of a history, and he starts off in a very scholarly fashion, but then breaks into the story, and pretty much at this point. And and yes, a northerner comes and says he wants to buy the land, and she kind of she says, "Oh, well, we have ghosts on our thing. I've talked to one, but we don't want to sell you our land." And she gets in trouble from her aunts, who are all like, she's Adelaide is Aid. She's super kind of rambunctious and vivacious, and won't do what she's told. And the aunts banish her upstairs. And in the meantime, the stranger comes and buys the land, raises the mansion, and has got up surveying posts. And yes, and she goes there, and she's like heartbroken, because it's like, oh, is he ever this black boy is never going to come back. I'm never going to see him. But I'm gonna search everywhere for those doors, for the doors to find him, to get into him. And we get these little bit of scholarly stuff of you can't go through a door without coming, and you can't go through a door and come back without changing things. And they talk about the young Genghis Khan having gone through a door and disappeared for 7 years, and when he came back, he was equipped with the knowledge to conquer the world. So that kind of changing the world. But yeah, so pretty much, okay, well, this is obviously Jnry's parents, the mother and the father, scholar, I would assume. That would be him. Yeah, so she might not know that, and I don't know if this is supposed to be a surprise or someone else, but it pretty much seems like, yep, this is the story of her parents that she's reading in this book. It'll be interesting to see if she immediately cottons on to that fact. And indeed, we've had the whole thing of Locke saying, oh, I don't want that dog because it's a mongrel. And it's I'm thinking yes, more. Yes, that would be the racial theory. I've been reading Journey to Mars in 1894 and various other works, and definitely an anti-intermixing of the races definitely comes up a lot in this kind of literature. So the Alex Harrow is doing a good job of mixing that into the bend here. So yeah, that is the introduction and chapters 1 and chapters 2 of the 10,000 Doors of Jnry. And yes, these are big hunky chapters of about 40 minutes to an hour long each. So I've made my way in. This is all a part of my little binge of Poptimus recommendations. I was listening to his 10 books of 2020, and this was one of his top 10 reads of that thing. And I just kind of went through into the library thing and said, oh, okay, what books are there, and just requested them. So give myself a little variety of reading from a different perspective. This is apparently a bestseller. I wasn't that impressed with his first one that I picked up of his, which was the Run Me to Earth by Paul Yoon, but very well written. So this one's fun so far. Definitely has a bit of that kind of that florid flair of language of someone writing in 1901, kind of the early 19th century, kind of that kind of writing, and a good adventure writing, apparently. But apparently it's not supposed to be YA. But, you know, it's young characters in it so far. So, and sparks of love, both with January and her, and the young guy who brings her the dog, and then what's most likely her mother, Adelaide, and this young guy who's a scholar. So yes, I'll leave it there. More videos later.